And I've got the return of the old favourite.
Hey, sponsored by, or powered by, I should say.
Welcome to the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who this year. I asked various Doctor Who fans that in the 60th year of Doctor Who, if we were to have a Hall of Fame for Doctor Who, like there's a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or a Wrestling Hall of Fame or Football Hall of Fame, etc., who would be the first inductee? And very interestingly, we had quite a lot of responses for this, but only 10 names mentioned, and one was miles ahead of everyone else. So I will quickly run through the honourable mentees. We've got Barry Letts for producing the show for 5 years, and
And
uh,
arguably the best in terms of pure getting the show on air in a smooth way there has ever been.
oh, indeed. Uh, on a similar note, another person mentioned was Uncle Teddy himself, Terence Dicks, the greatest script editor the show ever had.
But the master of structure and obviously the writer of, I think it's about 80 Target books plus another 5 or 6 novels on top.
He
Brilliant. Yeah, and a lovely fellow in the flesh as well, as I and encouraging to the younger generation, apparently.
I had one chance to meet him when I was 10 because he was in a book signing in Tower Records in Glasgow, and I turned it down because I was too shy, and I have regretted it ever since.
I've met him, I think, 2 or 3 times. Once was I was sitting at the back of a convention panel, and he and Barry Letts came in, and I had my itinerary beside me. He said, "Do you mind if we borrow that?" "Yeah, go ahead. You're Terence Dicks, so you can do whatever you want." And the second time I was getting the other time I was getting my Three Doctors, the first Target book I ever bought, signed. It is. I've put this photo up many a time. It is a battered, well-read copy that is basically held together with maybe my childish love for it. And on the title page now, there are 2 signatures: me at 7 years old and Terence Dicks.
Also nominated for 3 Doctor Who's themselves. William Hartnell for being the person who started the whole caboodle as the Doctor.
Thoroughly
Uh,
agreed.
Patrick Troughton for proving you could place the lead and make the show survive. And Tom Baker, who I think is just like the patron saint of honorary granddads for quite a lot of fandom.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. You can't argue with any of them. You might be able to add, as we go on, in someone like Tennant or Eccleston for proving it to bring it back. Tennant for essentially making the show as popular as it's ever been.
One I quite liked because it wasn't what I was expecting, but I quite like it as a one is Delia Derbyshire.
Oh, I do like that. Yes,
Yes,
the realization of the theme is fantastic. Would we be here without it? Because it is something so absolutely. It sums up the show. It's something. It's a Ron Grainer composition. It's something kind of familiar if you just play it straight, but that realization adds that oddness. It's that Doctor Who thing of the Yeti and the Lewin tooting back thing. The weird intruding into the normal.
it's got this is sort of ethereal otherworldliness about it, which kind of announces the show before it arrives. Even as seen in an Unearthly Child when they have it playing over the policeman. What and you just it's like it announces here's a new show. You're going to love it. Enjoy.
Absolutely, but there's something weird going on.
Person who's an Andre before the two who were miles ahead of everyone else, by the way, is one of your favourites. It is in fact Mr. Rusty T Davis.
Oh, the tall Welshman working on Doctor Who.
Yeah.
What more could you
Mm.
want?
Yes. And
Yeah,
obviously, he brought the show back.
absolutely. He brought the show back. He not only that, he reshaped it. I know he's building to a certain degree on what been done with, what Andrew Cartmel had done, and what Paul Cornell et al. Had done in the New Adventures, but none of them would have quite nailed the TV of the 21st century quite like Russell T Davies did. I may have written a book on this, at some point.
Oh, about some episode from 2005.
Yeah, some insignificant one, some flower thing,
There preceded a plug for the Black Archive book on Rose by John Arnold. The runner-up, who had quite a few more votes than the rest of these people, is somebody who would be a no-brainer, and that is the father of Doctor Who himself, Sidney Newman.
Oh, of course, it's the idea alone, Doctor Who is his was the idea, but Doctor Who is such a team creation at the start as well. So it's developing that idea, and he would be in a television hall of fame, over here and in Canada, frankly, given given having read his biography, which my good friend Graham assisted with, and is well worth getting hold of. Head of Drama, I can thoroughly recommend it. Yeah, you cannot really argue with someone who just comes up with a brilliantly simple idea and goes, "Here you go, run with that, guys," and has the sense to let them get on with it.
Like, I like the stories of how he liked to encourage conflict because he figured that. But I specifically like the stories of him that while he was grumpy and knew his own way, he was quite willing to budge to evidence if it came about. For example, his famous U-turn on Daleks as soon as he saw the ratings.
Absolutely, you clearly know what you're doing. Go on and go, go on and go with it. Yes, he liked conflict. I think he liked to know people would fight for their ideas. I think you've seen if people would not stand up for it, and then they go, maybe it's not quite that strong an idea.
Probably no surprise to you, John, who the one person who was miles ahead in first place in this poll for the first inductee was.
I'm going to suspect it's the person I voted for myself.
She was a legend in TV. She was pivotal to Doctor Who. You could quite feasibly call her Doctor Who's mother, and in fact, Russell T Davies did on screen. It is the late, great, wonderful Verity Lambert.
I mean, where else would you start? She was the one who drove this idea through, who fought for it. Right, you read the stories of what was going on in 1963, 1964. She battled for the show, against the BBC bureaucracy who didn't necessarily understand it. Like it might have just lasted that, 13 weeks or so. It might just be this fondly remembered cult thing, which which we can't see because everything was junked or something. It's her ideas. I would also put in a shout for David Whittaker being in there at this point, because between them they pretty much cook up everything that was original about Doctor Who. Funny thing about Verity is, I say, she gets it started, but it develops so much effect. There's not that much of the DNA of her show left, and that's as it should be over the years, because it's a show that's 60 years later. It cannot remain the same. But without that show, without the willingness to embrace the oddness and the avant-garde, bridging the mainstream, you were bridging the children and the adults, aiming for that huge family audience, and bringing the oddness of it into the living room. Because you go back to those Hartnell stories, and they are deeply, deeply strange. And I'm not just talking about the Web Planet here.
See, it strikes me as, if I can use a Doctor Who analogy, it's like City of Death. You see, Earth, when the ship explodes and creates life, is nothing like Paris in 1979. If that ship doesn't explode, you don't get Paris in 1979.
This is
Doctor
it.
Who in '63 may be a completely different beast to any of your favourite episodes since, but if Verity Lambert didn't exist to push it through, none of that exists.
Absolutely, absolutely, and just that's that whole early team. I think would be just be my first, my first nominees as a collective. Verity, David, Bill Hartnell, the great William Russell,
Yes.
Jackie and Caroline Ford. So all of them. Yeah, I'd have them in as a collective, but I don't think you can argue with the founders at all of being the first members of a Hall of Fame.
I mean, in my opinion, they're all legends. Well, that concludes the Hall of Fame one. And if people have opinions or want to disagree terribly for some reason, they can join the comment below. Thanks.
Who did we miss out?